Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reasoned Choice Media. Welcome home, y'all. This is episode 9 of Native Land Pod, where we break down all that's happening in politics with a little bit of culture spread in there. We are your hosts, Tiffany Cross, Angela Rye, and I'm Andrew Gillum, celebrating what, ladies? The beginning of Women's History Month. Welcome home, everybody.
That's true. Welcome home.
In fact, this is such a special Women's History Month for us to be talking in person because we've got a pretty awesome history maker sitting right between us.
Got 3 history makers.
Well, but there's something to
breaking
be
news
said. Y'all, you may have heard, let me just say this first and foremost. Tiffany ain't going nowhere. She's right here. This is Native Land Pod family.
Why you give it away at the beginning?
But I ain't giving nothing away. I just don't want nobody rumoring about the wrong stuff. Our co-host, the Tiffany Cross, is about to launch out on a new endeavor. Film producer and FAMU Rattler.
I was going to say, you gotta shout out the Rattlers.
And veteran journalist, our friend Tiffany Cross, are set to launch a cross, like what you did there, Generations, with iHeart Podcast debuting March the 12th. And the reason why this is so important to mention during Women's History Month, because tell us about it, Tiff, but you're going to be talking across generation and ways to further love on, educate, share knowledge and wisdom experientially across generations. Tell us about the new venture.
Well, first of all, thank you to my co-hosts for the shout out and giving me this time to talk about it. I am not going anywhere. We made this announcement on Instagram and across all the socials. And people are like, you're leaving Native Land Pod? Like, no, this is my family. So we will continue to talk about politics here every week. On Across Generations, you will not hear anything about politics at all. This is where I'm talking to, I'm convening a conversation of Black women, a woman who's old enough to be my mother, young enough to be my daughter, and we'll talk about a singular topic. So we might talk about sex and how our attitudes have changed about sex because somebody in their 60s or 70s has a different relationship with sex. Somebody in their 20s could be having sex with a few people, maybe at the same time,
so
maybe different times, who knows?
What are the 60-year-olds doing? Because,
they might be having...
They might, but it's changed for them, and even if they've been that way their whole life, the way we look at it as a society has changed. And so I will tell y'all, I'm telling all my business.
Oh, Lord.
I am getting into my personal life. I'm not just the interviewer or the moderator. It is a conversation. And so we'll talk about, sex, but it could be like, what do you wish you knew about money in your 20s? It could be, what if you never had kids? The 20-something who doesn't want kids, a 70-year-old whose whole life was about, being a wife and mother. So this is a different table to say welcome home, y'all, too. It is about Black women. It's not exclusively for Black women. Black women, as you all know, have always been oracles, and people have always pulled up a seat to our table to hear what we have to say. We've raised people's kids who don't look like us. So I believe there's magic that happens when we come together to talk about this. So I invite you all to join me. Our first guest is Dionne Warwick, which I'm really excited about. We have Chef Carla Hall. But it's not really celebrity driven. Like you all know your grandmothers, when you sit at that table and gain that wisdom, they are celebrities in our minds. I love the pictures of you, Angela, with your mom and grandmother and just seeing like the commonality and how you all look and how beautiful that is. So you can fully appreciate what it means when we all come together and just the magic that exists. So thank you guys.
So we need y'all to go ahead and follow, go ahead and subscribe already. Go ahead and listen.
Still in the iHeart family. This will be with iHeart. And I just want to give a special shout out because everybody on this podcast knows personally and loves Will Packer.
Yes.
He does not just talk the talk, he walks the walk. He is for us. Black women sit at the center of his success, and he has always been a writer. A member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I know the Alphas will want me to say that, and the Rattlers will want me to remind them that he's a FAMU guy. So when my MSNBC show was canceled, he was the first person to email me to say Will Packer Productions would love to be in business with Tiffany Cross. So shout out to Will.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And I love you lifting up those stories because when you are perceived as I don't know, not touchable, right, by polite society.
Yeah.
It matters who reaches in first to extend a hand. The other thing that I'm excited about your upcoming endeavor is oftentimes we see our mothers sort of just as the mother in the maternal role and what that does in relation to us as their child. Mm-hmm. But our mothers had lives.
Yes.
They did things.
They were women before they were mothers.
And they still are.
Yeah.
And they have dreams and ambitions and hopes. And so I'm going to look forward to sort of the intergenerational engagement that we get to see these women as whole individual people. So y'all, make sure you download and subscribe.
YouTube and iHeart. And anywhere you get your podcast.
Wherever you get your podcast.
And y'all will see Angela. Angela does not know this. I've been volunteering her for everything I'm doing. We're hosting dinners all. I'm like, yes, Angela and I will be there. Yes. Angela will introduce me there. Angela will walk the carpet with me there. So Angela's hearing this for the first time that she's going to be right next to me the whole time.
She's your sister. She's our sister.
Make sure y'all download the show and you rate and review her show just like you should do for ours.
Yes. Which is exactly where I'm going in 1 second, which is to then say, Angela and Tiff and I had a conversation after last week's episode where, we got some feedback from some of our viewers that we want to be careful to make sure in answering our viewer questions that we don't in any way come off as overbearing or intimidating or in any way dismissive of the questioners. And I got to tell you, all three of us were just sort of set aback, obviously welcoming of the feedback, but would hate to believe that and would hate to in any way portray a dismissal of any of our listeners' questions, that we want to create here the kind of culture where you are invited in, you are family, and families don't always agree. So let's put that out there. But we also want you to know that this show can't be this show without you.
It's your show.
It's your show.
This show is for you.
And so we're going to continue to try to, self-evaluate and to make sure that we course correct. And if we have given any listener out there, and certainly any questioner up to this date, the impression that we've sort of shot past your question and done our own thing, just charge it to our head and not to our heart. We're consuming news and information, almost feels like 24/7. And sometimes it is that we're responding to the thing the cable person said, but you had a word that may have, implicated them. And so your question kind of got bought into a larger response.
Or sometimes even among us, like we disagree, we have a nuanced point. And so the three of us can talk to each other very passionately because we know there's love there. We've known each other for decades. And that extends to the viewer sometimes. And so we're family and the viewers are family, and we so appreciate your feedback, your questions. Keep sending them. And even if y'all are upset about something like this time, like we hear that we are family. Welcome home, y'all. And just like family has disagreement, so do we. And we never intend to dismiss your perspective. And sometimes, y'all get in our DMs and on those videos are like maybe mad about something we said, and that's what family does.
But you know what? That's exactly the point. I love that people felt so comfortable reaching out, DMing, directly saying, hey, I love the show, but this thing hit me this way.
Yeah,
thank you. And keep doing that, because that's also what responsible family does for each other. We'll get you on the chin, and we got to do it in front of everybody necessarily,
Accountability.
Right? So let me get into what we're going to be talking about today. I just wanted to make sure, the host and I wanted to make sure that we covered those things. In the words of Whitney Houston, we've got something in common. Nikki Haley and Bernie Sanders have something in common. Super Tuesday arrived and went. Biden will deliver his State of the Union address today. If you're listening on Thursday, the day this episode drops, we'll go over what we want to hear from him. Last week, we teased that we were going to be pulling back some of the layers of the case involving Marilyn Mosby, former state prosecutor there in Baltimore. And we're going to do that today. So you don't want to miss one single word of what we've got to say about her particular case and our ask for you to get involved. And of course, in politics everywhere, we're going to be talking about somebody who has an interesting philosophy on paying taxes. And if you want to know which celebrity this is and what that rationale is, you stay tuned. And of course, we'll wrap up this episode with your listener questions, our listener questions, and we'll make our charge to each of you for this week. So stay tuned. All right, y'all. So Super Tuesday, it came and went. And I'm just curious to know, were there any surprises?
You know what's so funny?
What?
Yes. When in the rundown, you said, Nikki Haley and Bernie Sanders had something. I said, they
do have
no,
something
I
in
know,
common.
but it took me like the full 30 seconds because I was like, now why does his head think Bernie Sanders is running? And I'm like, oh, Vermont. I see what you did there.
So do you want to give it away?
No, you give it away.
Guys.
I teed you up.
All right. So Super Tuesday, of course, a whole bunch of states went to vote. And Nikki Haley, who has pledged, of course, to stay into the race up until Super Tuesday, and we are now past that point. She picked up one state, y'all. She picked up a whole state where she beat
He said a whole state.
the former president. That's a big deal as far as I know.
Yeah.
To have Republicans in the state of Vermont, all of them go out, or as many of them as could vote, and they chose Nikki Haley as their choice for the Republican nomination.
Well, she also won the territory, or Washington, D.C. as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Washington, D.C. does, still
Taxation without representation.
taxation
Yeah.
without representation.
Listen, I don't think there's any major surprise here. I think Nikki Haley has been on the stump saying a lot of things about Donald Trump. I will not clutch my pearls the day that she is on stage endorsing Donald Trump. Republicans have a tendency to not fall in love, but fall in line.
Yeah.
She served in his first administration. We haven't seen any new evidence of how terrible Donald Trump is. He was just as awful in 2016 when she agreed to serve in that administration as he is in 2024. So I pay her no attention. I pay the whole right wing that it's not the Republican Party anymore, as you've said many times, Andrew. They have all morphed into the MAGA cult. And she is a member, despite her saying he'll have to earn her votes. She is a member. But I think we have a sound of her dropping out of the race, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, because she won a race and dropped out.
Yeah.
Let's play the sound of Nikki Haley getting out of the race for president, rather suspending her campaign.
Time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that. I have no regrets. And although I will no longer be a candidate, I will not stop using my voice for the things I believe in. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind."
Yeah. So, Tiff and Angela, I'm really curious to know whether or not you think this is going to be Nikki playing more gamesmanship.
Yes.
Basically trying to be courted, trying to be offered something, maybe the V, maybe not. I'm not real sure. But she certainly didn't, I think, with that quote, go the more principled route around this. It was much more of a transactional kind of, you're going to need to come talk to me, bruh.
Yeah.
Before I give you my support.
Yeah.
She's going to endorse him. I wish that
Non-issue.
No, she's going to endorse him. So I think the other two big shockers about Super Tuesday were the exit poll that we saw where Nikki Haley supporters said that they would not vote for Donald Trump in the fall. I think that we talk about all the time, polls is always too early to tell, too early to call. I think it's the same thing there. Like, you should not expect that Nikki Haley supporters aren't going to follow Nikki Haley. Once she endorses Donald Trump, they will fall in line. I think the other thing that was kind of interesting, and it's something that we never really talk about in primary season, is American Samoa, where Jason Palmer beat Joe Biden.
Right.
And
1,000 votes total.
Yeah, not a whole lot of there. There was a caucus in American Samoa, and I have never heard of Jason Palmer in my life, so I wish I could give y'all that political breakdown. But shouts out to you, Jason Palmer, for making
Jason
history.
is going to be able to say for the rest of his life,
I beat Joe Biden.
I'd be the sitting president for the nomination.
He happy, too. He
Period.
didn't put $500,000 of his own money into that race. Yeah. That's all I know about him, too. Shout out to you, Jason Palmer.
That's
Good
real.
job.
That's real.
Good
right
job.
there.
You did something. You made history.
Well, there were some other shockers. If we were not particularly surprised by Joe Biden and Donald Trump pretty much essentially wrapping up the nomination fight for both the Democrats and the Republicans. And for those of you all who are out there advocating for a third party, I feel you. I hear you. I always keep going back to this Ross Perot, who had more money than God. Ow. Got out there, put it all in there, and it didn't even make a dent, except to help one party or another to ultimately win. So I'm not saying there's no hope. I'm just simply saying we got to be realistic in our approach and much more strategic about the launch of a third party if we were to go that direction. But I will tell you, North Carolina, and before I even just zero in on North Carolina, the South period overwhelmingly rewarded Donald Trump. I mean, the numbers there, Nikki Haley couldn't even break respectable in many of these southern states. In the upcoming few races, many of them are going to be focused on the South. I don't know if they're trying to communicate something to us, y'all, that we don't already know, but they certainly doubled down on Donald Trump. But there was this particular race in North Carolina of the lieutenant governor who was elevated from lieutenant governor to the Republican nominee for governor of the great state of North Carolina. Y'all, I'd love for you to hear what Donald Trump has to say about him, and then I'd love for us to hear what he has to say about us.
This is Martin Luther King on steroids, okay? Now, I told that to Mark. I said, I think you're better than Martin Luther King. I think you are Martin Luther King times 2.
Y'all.
We don't need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear from Mark Robinson, because I expect asinine, silly comments like that from Donald Trump. I want to hear from the black man that he happens to be talking about.
Let's just bookmark this for everybody. Donald Trump thinks that this dude, Mark Robinson, is the second coming of Martin Luther King, except 2 times his value. Now, Mark, what do y'all have? What are you saying to us as you try to compete for this gubernatorial slot there in North Carolina?
There are some people that were talking about reparations in this country. They wanted reparations. And I remember I made this particular liberal so angry at me because I told them right to their face, nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes. Why do you owe? Because somebody in those fields took stripes for you. Somebody, after those fields were ended and slavery was ended, somebody had to walk through Jim Crow for you.
And he trying to send us back to Jim Crow, I guess, huh?
I mean, the brother went on to say, basically, don't nobody owe you nothing. We've had our rights. We got our freedom. Now go do great things. Go do great things with your life.
I think it's important just to let the viewers know a little bit about Mark Robinson. So he's 55 years old. He fancies himself as a conservative. His rise to fame was really these very inflammatory things that he would say on social media. So when we say we've elected the ugly comments section to the highest office of the land with Donald Trump, this is his offspring.
Yeah.
He and his wife have been together for quite some time. She had an abortion before they were married, which he has come out and said he deeply regrets, which has made him a staunch anti-choice advocate. He is very anti-LGBTQ. That is a big part of his platform. He says the hateful things out loud. This is not somebody who has any interest in appealing to black voters. He has an interest in appealing to white voters who can feel good about themselves for voting for someone like this and be able to simultaneously say they're not racist. Because if this black man is saying these racist things, then how bad can I be? I think this is a cartoonish caricature of what Donald Trump would like to put out there before the people, to say something so disparaging about Dr. King. That's not something that seeing, thinking, thoughtful people hear and take seriously. It's meant to be a clippable soundbite. The danger is that he won the primary and that he will be the head of a state within the United States with real executive power and can enact policy. And as we see increasingly the battle between state government and federal government, that is something for us all to be deeply concerned about. I just want to add, you talked about the southern states. I was raised in the South, and we always assume that southern states are red. The South is only red until it ain't, and we have to remember that. There are pockets throughout the South with very progressive leadership and views. We talked about
including North Carolina.
Including North Carolina.
With the Democratic governor.
Yeah, it's the primary right now. He doesn't have to win.
Charlotte is a progressive area. In Mississippi, Jackson is a progressive area. In Alabama, Birmingham, and there are all other pockets. When we think about rural America, we think of the South, even though the rural America can be everywhere, but rural in the South, they're not just white conservative voters in rural America. There are black people, brown people who live in rural southern areas who have the ability to change what the political South looks like. And I think instead of assuming these things happen, we need to empower those people. And if this buffoon is somebody who can scare people into organizing and activating that Southern Bible Belt hemisphere into being more politically impassioned, despite systems in place that prevent them from getting to the ballot box, I'd love to see us put our resources there.
But you said it. I think it matters that this guy now is the titular head of Republicans in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. He won out against a more status quo traditional Republican model. And so it does beg the question, Angela, what are Republicans seeing? What are they feeling when they decide to go in and elect and erect to higher office, higher position, higher authority? The voice of Republicans in that state being anti-Semitic, anti-LGBT, in many ways, in my opinion, listening to them, anti-Black, as their figurehead, as their voice, especially when you consider the fact that North Carolina is a state that in presidential politics has come practically up to the line of giving their electoral votes to Democrats.
Didn't I feel like Barack Obama
Barack won it once the first time, and then we lost the second time.
So I just want to say this as offer this caveat to your mother and your mother-in-law that he did not throw this Republican question to me because I'm a Republican.
I did not. Y'all know Angela ain't no Republican.
Well, we just got to clarify because some folks in these comments don't know either. But I think, what's more troubling to me than the fact that they go up to the line or sometimes cross the line or don't cross the line and vote blue is that there are Republican folks who are Black folks in this day and age who will exchange exchange these crazy remarks to make news, to create space for themselves on the side of an aisle where the line is much shorter. I'll never forget Gary Flowers talking about how people sometimes will go and take the shorter line because they can see their rise to power quicker. That is not new. Historically, those are the same folks who negotiated with the Dutch and the Portuguese and the British to sell us into slavery. And I'm not saying that there are not oppressive mindsets, mentalities, and even policies on the Democratic, liberal, and progressive sides of the aisle. Yeah. What I am saying is that if you're telling me that the folks who were actually paid when slavery ended, which was the slave owners, deserve even more, and that their offspring deserve even more, and that we should be the people who are paying that, I don't have nothing to say to you. You're like, not only are you engaging in very dangerous rhetoric, you are the reason, and your ancestors are the reason we're here.
Well, I'll just say this. If you are educated in the state of Florida right now under its current policies, you might actually believe that the overwhelming majority
like he was under DeSantis' curriculum
of slaves, of enslaved people were paid.
Well, he doesn't believe that.
No, this is what lawmakers in our state are saying.
We don't know what this man
I don't
believes.
believe he believes that. I really don't.
But
I think he's a minstrel show for the Republican
doesn't
Party.
Matter what he believes.
Yeah.
Right,
if
exactly.
his platform is the proliferation of this kind of stuff. And
Precisely.
it's dangerous, and it's really why we wanted to spend just a couple of moments, not just on the presidential, but y'all, we've got to look closely at who we are electing in our states.
Down ballot.
Or who you let get elected when you sit at home.
That's true.
You know, like
that's a good point.
That's the thing. It's like if you don't show up, you are saying to these folks, your vote matters more than mine. Your voice matters more than mine. The things that the policies that you push and advocate for matter more than me. And then you sit around and say, now, why won't this change? This is why I don't fool with politics. It is this dangerous cycle we can never get out of if you say, well, I don't see myself represented, therefore I'm going to sit at home. Well, you don't see yourself represented, therefore Now what?
But I just wanted to, that is true. I wholeheartedly agree with everything. But I also want to acknowledge the humanity of people who do stay at home. Because I understand when you are under an oppressive system where you can barely pay your rent or mortgage, where you don't know how to feed your family. And for 5 election cycles, somebody has been telling you it will change.
That's so true.
Somebody's going to come through and save you. Something is going to happen where the economy will get better for you specifically. These dilapidated schools are going to start to serve your children, and you don't see it. I'm not admonishing you.
Yeah.
I understand that perspective. And we have to start looking at Black people, not as Black voters. You're not a commodity in this system. So I would invite people who feel that way, or if you have somebody in your family who feels that way, something to share with them is you don't have to believe in the system. Believe in yourself. And what does this here democracy look like if you are the architect of it? And I think that speaks to your point, Andrew, about us being lacking in imagination sometimes. They have captured our imagination and said this is the only construct you can live in. What if we empowered ourselves, right?
I just want to say she come a long way since this morning. I love it.
No, I still feel the same way I feel this morning. Well, I'll just for our listeners, because we're talking about that. We had talked about, Angela and I disagree on Black people who support Trump. And I'm not saying we shouldn't talk to those people, but I think what I care about, it would never occur to me to say, Angela, this is what you should care about. You know, like you're saying, no, we have to care about them. Angela cares about, this is why the comments honestly frustrate me so much sometimes, because Angela and I disagree on this. And so when I hear people saying or read people saying things about Angela's position, I'm like, if y'all only knew, Angela actually gives a shit about your humanity. Yeah. She is saying, I care about you enough. I want to engage you. I want to talk to you. I want to bring you along and show you why Trump is a problem. My position is, some people gonna have to get left behind. I'm not trying to convince the slave you still a slave. If that's what you believe, then you gotta stay there. My audience is somewhere else. Angela and I and Andrew, we were and we were saying this should be the podcast. We should have a camera here. Because Angela was saying, no, but you have to care about those people. Like you have to. And I'm saying, that is not who I'm talking to. Those aren't the people I'm trying to bring along.
It's a lack of care for them. It is just that
where you're
going to spend your time.
That's why I was focused on.
But you speak to their humanity in a different way. Like Angela is like impassioned about it. And I'm like, yeah, if they get something, great. I hope so. But that's just not who I'm speaking to. But I think this is such an interesting discussion because there are so many people out there who feel how I feel or feel how you feel. And I think the nuanced discussion, this is why cable news drives me nuts, because this is a more intellectual, nuanced discussion than putting Angela on with somebody who is like this guy, Mark Robinson.
Now that I agree with.
Yeah.
But I do think, to the point of this conversation, it felt, what you just said felt very human. It felt like maybe I'm not going to speak to the person who's saying, F it, I'm voting for Trump. They probably really aren't. Some of them are really going to stay at home, and you talk to the folks who would stay at home and
those
why they would.
Those people I can speak to.
But what I'm saying is the person who's saying they're voting for Trump because they saw something different or they heard that talked about enough, is that same person. It's the same person who says they'd stay at home because what they're saying is, I just haven't seen where this party's delivered for me. So I got to try something different. Even if that means trying something different is voting for this nut or staying at home. To me, it's no different because they're both a vote to in democracy.
See, I see the difference. I see a big difference between those two factions of people. And you said this. I think you were saying Charlemagne said this, but I heard it from you when you said it's not always a battle between Trump and Biden. It's a battle between Biden and the couch. Yeah. To me, I can talk to the person who feels distant. Well, thank you, Charlemagne, for that, because I think that is a legitimate thing to point out. That is my concern. That person I can talk to. Somebody like this guy or a follower of his who feels like, yes, they're speaking to me, I can take all of my frustrations and go to the oppressor side and adopt them because they will save me. They might not save the greater good, but they will be so grateful for my black ass walking across the aisle to them that they will bestow upon me some sort of favor. Those people, I don't care about them.
I can talk to this lieutenant governor either.
Those are the people you're talking to, though.
No, I don't. I think there's I think that there's someone who says, you know what? I remember feeling relief under Trump. Doesn't mean they didn't get relief under Biden, but Biden didn't tell them about it.
Okay, that's fair.
Right? I think that there's somebody in there who's saying, I'm seeing jobs wane in my community and everybody's, so frustrated about it. And Donald Trump said he was going to close the borders. I'm not supporting this position. I'm just saying what their frustration is. I want a president who's going to make sure that it's America first, not knowing that only include Black America.
Yeah, right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can understand that. I don't hear the people who I'm like, ooh, it's not the, and I'm trying not to use terms that are mean or put downs, as Miss Irene Lindsay, my second grade teacher, would say. But like, I don't want to call them a coon or a minstrel show, even though sometimes I feel that way. I said, even though sometimes I feel that way. But some of the people who are raising this are not them. Mm-hmm. They're talking about economic relief. They're talking about the migrant crisis. They're talking about, maybe some of them might be pro-life. I don't know, but like,
anti-choice.
I agree with that too. But I'm saying they might see, I'm church, I'm Jesus all day, so you can't have an abortion, even if I gave myself grace for having one 3 years ago. I'm saying there's some in between, there's some nuance there, and I don't want to throw everyone out at the same. Yeah, everybody ain't marked.
You both have had a really, I think,
it was
very
a
important
we had
part of this conversation.
But this morning, were we not?
You were in it this morning as well.
You
and I
too.
wasn't sure how this is. Well, I mean, my position on this is very. I think Black people are pragmatic voters. At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, period. What's up? And I said it before on this podcast that we cannot deconstruct 400 years of more than that, by the way, but certainly the enslavement of our people. But we can't replace all of the systems and structures that have been designed to hold up, to lift up white supremacy in this country with one administration, even a 2 or a 3 or a 4. We can obviously make strides toward it. And to that end, y'all, I think it takes us, Angela, you made the comment that we're hearing the sound bites that Donald Trump speaks being parroted back by some of these very people that we're talking about, because he says it. He takes responsibility.
Over and over.
He takes credit for it. And that takes us to this next conversation after the break, which is going to be about what we want to hear from the President of the United States, Joe Biden, as he comes to the nation, and what I think is one of the most important platforms that he gets, where he gets to update the country on the true state of the nation. So like we said, the State of the Union is the opportunity for the president to just lay it out. What have you done and what do you want to do? And why should we basically bring you back? But it is also an opportunity, if you slick and sly and clever enough, to get some jabs in there if you need to. And there was really, in my opinion, y'all, nobody better than this. Let's hear this clip and see if it moves you in any way, everybody.
I have no more campaigns to run. My only agenda, I know because I won both of them.
Shade.
Listen, so that was Notorious Obama, not to be confused with Notorious B.I.G. And for those of you who are listening, as podcasts, I guess, are designed for that purpose, you may not have caught that all. But basically, that was Barack Obama saying at the State of the Union, look, I've got no more races to run. And of course, the sly-ass Republicans respond with cheers and applause and of oblation that he can't run again. And of course, the president in his clever, sly way responds, I know this because I won both my elections, which was, again, I thought a cute, cool drop of the mic moment. But I do think there is something about both
that we
the
will
style
not get this time
and the substance. I won't put it past Joe.
That's fair.
Put it
That's
past
fair.
Joe.
It might not be like this, but maybe he'll do his own way.
I think because we all traffic in this is what we do, that we are watching the State of the Union. I would be curious to see the ratings for the past couple of State of the Unions. Had I been better prepared, I would have seen that. Most Americans are not sitting around their televisions watching this.
No.
There are thousands of things screaming for our attention all the time. Angela's going to look up those numbers.
I'm going to check.
There are thousands of things screaming for our attention all the time. And so really people will hear about it in those clippable moments. They'll hear about it in, social media clips. They're just not as engaged. So that's the first challenge, I think, for President Biden. Speaking in sound bites. He is not President Barack Obama Obama. And because we live in such a social media society, people look for that great orator. People want to feel goosebumps like it's a Baptist minister. And I think it's hard for people to understand. You get a president like that maybe once in a lifetime. Yeah. We had, John F. Kennedy was amazing in that way. Ronald Reagan, a Republican, but he was the great communicator. He was an actor, literally. And so people connected with him. Yeah. And, we had President Barack Obama. Bill Clinton had some of that, but there was something magical about Barack Obama. I am not saying this because you're my co-host and you're sitting here. There was something magical about you that would inspire people to leave, college for a semester. You had that
still now
that unspoken thing that you can tell when somebody's reaching for it, they're aiming for it, they're trying to perform. Andrew, you had it naturally on that campaign trail in this podcast when we have discussions sometimes, even when we're just in our, private discussions, you still have that magical thing.
Always,
I don't believe President Biden has that. And so the challenge for him, for America on Thursday, is to convince people that I'm still with you and I understand you in a clippable way. And right now, the one thing that he can focus on that speaks to everybody, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, is the economy. Yeah. And I think he has to strike that balance between focusing on macroeconomics and microeconomics, because people will say, well, income equality is shrinking. Well, try selling that to people in the hood who don't feel that, who've seen no such evidence. People will say, oh, the economy is great for me, because they're referencing the stock market, which is not the economy. Try selling that, Wall Street talk on Main Street. It doesn't go. So to me, that is his one unifying message that can resonate with a lot of folks, especially the people who you talk about who, think, oh, well, Donald Trump signed my stimulus checks, and so if he gets reelected, I'll be getting these kind of checks again. And it's just not true. So I'd be curious to see. Angela, can I just say really quickly? Yeah. Angela found Joe Biden's 2023 State of the Union address was watched by 27.3 million viewers.
Yeah, that's the largest concentration.
That's about 11 million viewers lower than the previous year's figure. And I think we'll continue to see that number, that figure shrinking.
I think that's true. But I will tell you, for a president to make a statement, an hour-long statement, and have 27 million Americans watching is probably the broadest audience a president is going to get over the course of their administration.
Bill Clinton gathered the largest audience with nearly 70 million viewers.
Yes. Well,
it
Bill
was in the early 90s when there was no Netflix.
I'm just saying this is wow, just by comparison.
I think about Norman Lear, who was a mentor of mine, and I think that every week he reached into 100 million households with his shows. I mean, but TV has changed. There's a lot of distractions. 65 million people used to watch I Love Lucy.
Obama had 52.4 million.
For a lot of reasons, right?
I do know, too. Oh, go ahead.
But I was just, Tiffany's comments hit on both style and I think substance of it. And I just want to, just for a moment, say, in addition to the things that I want to hear from this president, I hope that he takes it slow. I hope he knows as he stands in the well of the U.S. Congress before Democrats and Republicans that he is the president of the United States of America. Yes, he's in the run, he's in the campaign, but right now the man is doing the job. And I think if he embodies that, I think he can become a different kind of communicator who comes off more declarative, more decisive. Don't rush us through your remarks, Mr. President, because they are important and we want to hear what you have to say, largely because there are a lot of people who are hanging out there trying to see if you've got what they need to then turn out and then support you again for this office. And so if I'm him, I want to hear a moral statement about Israel and about the West Bank. And Palestinians. I want a morally declarative argument. Your policy has been falling flat for most people because they don't see Netanyahu acting by it. But this generation of young voters, they see right and wrong. And if you can't make the case and make it clearly, you're going to have a problem. But I think we've got to be reminded as a country why we are involved in places all around the world. When people are saying, well, why aren't you involved like that right here at home?
Yeah.
Make us understand why it is it matters for us to be on the front lines where we are. And then the other thing I really need to hear from, I think, from this president during these remarks is I hope he casts a vision for where he wants to take us. Unfortunately, the economic numbers are not falling the way they want to hear them. So then tell me about if I'm the everyday average working American, walk me through that picture. Paint that picture. Grab me by the hand and walk me down the street so I can look to the left at that new house and to the right at that new business and down the road to a changing landscape in my neighborhood. Walk me down that road so I can emotionally connect with you around the public policy you want to pursue, except that policy is coming right up my block. And I think they've failed in so many ways to put the people at the center of their outreach at the White House through this administration. And again, I think it's because the president is saying, I'm doing the hard work every single day. Why can't they see it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we can't see it if you don't say it.
Every
and
time.
validators. You need community validators.
I want to, get into this because this comes up a lot. And that is, what is the Biden administration's agenda for Black people? Every year during Black History Month, they release another update on their accomplishments for the Black community. I think sometimes those accomplishments feel not like they're on the nose. And what I mean by that is, for example, they'll say the number of Black businesses that were started, the entrepreneurship in the Black community is significantly increased under the Biden administration. Well, unless y'all walked up to our door with LegalZoom, right? Like, you can't really take credit for that. You can say that you've, lessened regulations and made it easier to make it happen. Or even most recently, they've announced that they're going to restrict credit card late fees to $8, right? Those kinds of things are indirectly helpful to Black people, but that's not just for Black people. So what happens is they end up attributing Black accomplishment to successes that benefit the whole of the country. And I appreciate that. I remember when Barack Obama would say, I'm not the president for Black America, I'm the president of the United States of America. I understand the strategy, but I still think when someone or a group of people resurrect your campaign from the dead, you owe them some things. You owe them several things. And I do think it is smart for Black people to want to see progress from this administration. We also can't forget how civics works. We also can't forget that the legislative branch has something to do. One of my favorite moments in a Barack Obama State of the Union address was him saying, like, he was ready with the pen. You bring the paper to his desk, he was ready with the pen. And I just remixed that like I do Bible verses, but you understand the point. If they bring him a bill he can sign, he's going to sign it into law. And so the very things that Black folks need the most require legislative action. It does not preclude him from acting in his executive powers, signing executive action, signing executive orders to ensure our overall protection. He can absolutely hit on some of these things in the State of the Union address, and I'm sure he will. One of the things he likes to go to a lot is how many Black judges, Black women judges in particular, he's appointed. I think that's fantastic. We need a little bit more than that. People are still crying out for relief. You made a great point around the economy. Oh my God, people are not feeling that impact. With inflation up, they're not feeling that impact. So we have to make sure that people feel it. And that might mean person by person. I think we talked about this on a podcast recently too, around the diabetes piece. If it doesn't impact us directly, don't hit us with no indirect stuff. That's not going to work right now. It needs to be on the nose accomplishments for Black folks.
Well, there's also the issue, Angela, you've made this point. It is our right to make demands of this party. And I just don't see that with other constituency groups. You wouldn't feel the need to say, well, I'm not the president for all people who want gun control, or for just people who want gun control. I'm the president for everybody. We don't need to make those distinctions. It is a constant in politics where it's a whisper to Black folks.
Yes,
hey, after I get elected, I'm gonna hook y'all up. But everybody else on the stump, you are loud and proud about what you're gonna do for them. And I think it impacts how we look at it. People get very uncomfortable at some of the things we say here, some of the things that we said on air. And it's not out of we don't have the right. It's really out of fear.
Yes.
Don't make the white folks too uncomfortable or we won't be able to have this. And we have to stop that way of thinking. We are looking at a future, a near future that we can all see, envision, and touch. By 2040, there will be no racial majority in this country. And so the power structure will still mostly rest with a lot of white Americans. As we're disrupting that power, it's going to be uncomfortable for some people. So I would invite our community and every community who has some curiosity curiosity about your fellow countrymen, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the power structure is changing and power cedes nothing without demand. It's up to us to make that demand.
Tiff, you're right about it. And I just want to say that there are Black people in positions of power all around this country, from mayors, school boards, councils, state legislatures, a governor, and aspirants alike. And don't get confused when you start seeing some of us react in ways that start to reflect some of the patriarchy that we see exhibited by, frankly, by and large, by white men in greater society, and white women as well. And Black folks have been less comfortable with being in positions of power because in so many ways it's still new. But the statement that power cedes nothing doesn't say just white power cedes nothing. Mm-hmm. It says power cedes nothing. And so I think about this when I hear the immigration debate. I think about this when I hear some of the critiques that we make of other professional Blacks. We got to be above bar and better than everybody to do this, that, and the third. And then this judgmental things comes down, and you start to act in ways that resemble the people who oppressed you. And I want to call it to our consciousness, because I know we've got, a blessed audience of people who are experiencing probably various levels of success in their own lives, to just be cognizant that when we start to look out here and start to react in ways, especially around the changing demographic in this country, in ways that start to resemble the way in which the oppressed have acted toward us all of this time, to just check yourself and understand that that your commitment, that your reason for doing and for being is far outside of having to step on somebody else's neck, back, kill them, destroy them, set them up for failure as the only way in which you're able to survive. That isn't the truth.
Yeah.
That has never been our truth. And so I just hope that folks recommit themselves to a deeper understanding of what it means when you get in the position, in the seat of control. How do you conduct yourself? Do you start saying every brown person who's on a work site is there illegally because you don't see any people who are Black anymore? Just check it.
Yeah. I actually want to get into a story that we teased last week about Marilyn Mosby. So let's go to a quick break, and then I want to pick that up on the other side. You brought up a really good point about what will you do when you're in power, and somebody who was in power and held the line for Black folks is now in the line of fire. And we talked about this a little bit last week, and I want to talk about it this week. Marilyn Mosby, she is the former district attorney for the city of Baltimore. And for our younger viewers or people who may have forgotten, I just want to remind you all how we came to know Marilyn Mosby. This was the Freddie Gray case. In the city of Baltimore. You all remember Freddie Gray was arrested and taken for a death ride, essentially.
Into custody in the back of a police truck.
Absolutely. And he later died from injuries sustained there. And Marilyn Mosby charged those officers. And I just want to remind our viewers of what that moment meant to us when she stood on the steps of Baltimore. So let's listen to her, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
The findings of our comprehensive, thorough, and independent investigation, coupled with the medical examiner's determination that Mr. Gray's death was a homicide, which we received today, has led us to believe that we have probable cause to file criminal charges. To the youth of this city, I will seek justice on your behalf. This is a moment. This is your moment. Let's ensure that we have peaceful and productive rallies that will develop structural and systemic changes for generations to come. You're at the forefront of this cause. And as young people, our time is now.
I thought it was so important to play that because it was such a moment. And I want to remind people that the role of a DA, because Vice President Kamala Harris also was, essentially attacked on the campaign trail because people feel like you're a cop, you put people away. Let me explain something. The role of a DA is to decide who to charge, what charges to bring. That is important because they also decide who not to charge and what charges not to bring. So you need people who look like us in those positions. It was grossly unreported on when the media started paying more attention to those types of things and happening in different bureaucracies and different municipalities. We saw a sweep of more Black people being elected in those positions. These are elected positions. So this is why, to Andrew's point, those down ballot races matter just as much. Marilyn was elected to that position. She pissed off a lot of people. The police unions were very upset with her after that happened. And vowed vengeance and played the long game. And so, Angela, I know this is something that you have been closely monitoring. I know you talked to some sources on the ground, so I'd love to hear, because I know that she's been charged with things and convicted at this point, but I'm not really clear on all the charges and what exactly she did.
Yeah, I want to just double down a little bit in what you were just saying about Marilyn's role. Marilyn was a force to be reckoned with as the Baltimore City State's attorney. And the thing was, I was assuming this was all because of Freddie Gray, but it actually is much deeper than that. Freddie Gray was 2015. In 2016, the Department of Justice released a report on Baltimore Police Department's patterns and practices of just like so many violations. I mean, I can go through them. There's a
consent decree.
There's a laundry list. Yes, they were under consent decree after.
Explain what consent decree
is. Go ahead.
Simply stated, when the Justice Department comes in and they have recognized or observed a consistent pattern of misconduct, the Justice Department then has the right to step into that agency to uncover whatever it needs to uncover, and then to basically put them on a diet, or an action plan would be a better description.
Probation.
Yeah. But also with a set of steps that you are supposed to take to cure the harm that
it's
the
important for
institution's
listeners
created.
to understand that, because a lot of time on cable news platforms they'll say these things like DOJ and consent decree. People don't know, so I think it's important.
In fact, it's important to underscore that most of the consent decrees that have come down over the history of DOJ have been to right wrongs that have mostly been perpetuated against Black folks all across the country.
Absolutely. So in addition to the Freddie Gray case, the consent decree, because you all know that she did charge 6 officers in the Freddie Gray case and was not successful. But after that,
none of the officers were convicted, correct?
Not that I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, not that I remember. So after that, Marilyn went on to successfully prosecute 33 police officers on various convictions. There was a gun trace task force in 2017 where 8 officers were charged and convicted by 2018 relating to stealing money, stealing products, like all types of corruption. She was successful in that. In addition to that, she worked with a delegate in Maryland by the name of Eric Barron, who you will hear more about later. I'll go back to that. But she also she told people when she came into office that she was not going to prosecute any weed convictions. Folks were upset about that.
A lot of low-level offenses.
Yeah.
She declined to prosecute.
Yes, and specifically around weed, she was
marijuana.
Marijuana, cannabis conviction. She was not going to do that. She worked on a bill with a former state delegate, Eric Barron, and that bill was a vacature statute in 2019. And from that also worked to remove the convictions of 800 plus cases from the 8 officers that were associated with the gun trace task force.
What is a vacature statute?
To vacate previous guilty verdicts, or if there were negotiations between and somebody copped to having done what you said I did, whether they did it or not, probably for a lesser sentence. So she vacated those previous orders.
Got it. Okay.
Then, in addition to that, helped to exonerate 13 innocent Black men, and then worked through her crime control and prevention division to develop and foster relationships that are healthy relationships with the justice system with 7,000 young people.
Wow.
When she was voted out of office in 2022, her opponent basically has undone all of those reforms.
Wow.
They were mostly funded by Sinclair. Broadcasting, and
so Sinclair Broadcasting is a conservative outlet. What do you mean they were funded?
Which runs probably
Campaign
any local
wherever
news
you live.
that you're
Sinclair
watching.
Broadcasting is in your neighborhood.
That's
but
right.
you're saying they funded this guy's campaign
against
Can I just say one thing really quickly? In full disclosure, I worked with Nick Mosby, Marilyn's either soon-to-be ex-husband or ex-husband, on a campaign. So I know a little bit about Baltimore. It has the highest concentration of formerly incarcerated individuals. It did at the time. That number may have shifted. So high is this number that on campaigns, when people run for mayor, the formerly incarcerated are organized enough that they endorse candidates. They hold candidate forums, and it is impressive to see. And it's mostly black men, probably 98% black men, who have served their time, whether it was deserved or not. But as if we all know, it's a very unforgiving criminal justice system, and have come out and used their political power. And I know Marilyn Mosby and Nick would both engage them. So her work seems stellar. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm glad that you said that. I think the thing to know now is fast forward past all of that success. There's little black kids that now are like, oh, I actually can be a prosecutor. I see myself reflected in this. My family members who I thought would normally be on the other end of what I've done would actually be helped by me being in office. Marilyn has been severely punished. So since then, Marilyn has faced several counts of perjury, of making false mortgage applications. She was tried in November of 2023 convicted in November 2023 of 2 counts of perjury. The charges were related to withdrawing of funds from the city of Baltimore's deferred compensation plan. That's as if you had a 401k, if you're in corporate. On the Hill, we had thrift savings plan.
This is her money?
Her money that she's...
Like a retirement plan, essentially.
401k.
So even better than a retirement plan, a deferred compensation plan is like... You're supposed to get $30,000 a year in your salary, except you defer that $30,000 into a retirement plan or into a savings account that acts like a retirement plan, which you can borrow from at any point in time, and it accrues interest, but the interest is paid back to yourself. This is wholly
she withdrew that
her
money.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Wholly her
and
money.
so she claimed adverse financial consequences during the COVID pandemic. Let's just pause right there. Then the 2 withdrawals that she took out, I want to make sure I hit these amounts.
Please.
They are very important.
Please.
$40,000 and $50,000. So that's for a total of $90,000. The deferred compensation plan is a 457B, and it's a COVID-related distribution request. The executive director of this deferred compensation plan, his name is David Randall, testified on the stand that a hardship, it's not a hardship, it's an adverse financial consequence, and an adverse financial consequence could be $50. If you were hit by $50, you would qualify for being able to withdraw this money. The Department of Justice argued that she didn't experience financial hardship, which is an objective standard. The subjective standard is an adverse financial consequence. So they were arguing 2 different standards.
And Angela, just to say further about the objectiveness of it, the reason why it is further objective is because you can't go to a computer and put in a reason and it then it put out an approval or denial. An individual must hear a reason, and that individual then decides whether or not you meet it or you don't. So there are guidelines, but it is almost 100% subjective.
And she was able to withdraw. And the point is,
which meant an employee had to approve of it.
DOJ, the Department of Justice, said she didn't experience financial hardship, again, or arguing that objective standard because she received her full salary. Now, here's where I want to pause as Black people. How many of us know she makes on the other side of $250,000 a year as a prosecutor? She's the breadwinner for her family at that point.
Her husband is in a city council, which pays very little.
But forget about him.
Or ex-husband, I should say.
Mama, dad, cousin in them.
Right.
The
responsibility coming,
that everybody knows is
it's
making
just 2 young children, 2 young girls.
If anyone went through the pandemic, remember, like, we have to put ourselves there.
Yeah.
we don't know when this thing is going to end.
Right.
We don't know how long we're carrying the people in our family. That is an adverse financial consequence.
Yeah.
You don't get to decide that for her. So this is all of what's at play in this November trial. They said there's no definition for what an adverse financial consequence is. That is why 739 people in the city of Baltimore who have on this same deferred compensation plan withdrew money from that. 3 of them were in the same agency as Marilyn Mosby. But she's the one.
How many were prosecuted or charged?
I think Marilyn is the only one.
Right.
Because they're making an example out of her. So this is very clear. Marilyn, at this point, her marriage is on the rocks. Mm-hmm. She is thinking about home ownership and the fact that she does not own a home because her name is not on the family home. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to figure out how to get on her feet with her 2 girls, hence those 2 withdrawals, because they are going to be used, she hopes, to buy a home for them. Now, the potential sentence for the 2 perjury counts she was convicted on is 5 years. Now, let's go to February 2024, because that's not it. They bifurcated the trials. They bifurcated the charges. So she's tried on this first set of issues. Now there's the mortgage application issue.
So right now it's 5 years for what you just explained to us. She's facing 5 years.
Yes, she's not been sentenced yet from the November case because they were waiting to sentence her altogether after the February case. So in February, just last month, she was facing 2 counts of making false mortgage applications. She was found guilty and convicted for 1 of those counts. They say that she made 7 misrepresentations in her mortgage application, including not sharing that there was a delinquent tax lien. Nick Mosby's already testified in court that he lied to her about clearing that lien. So the mortgage application was answered to the best of her knowledge. They said that she was not supposed to use the property as a rental property. Put a pin in that. We'll get back to that later. That she lied about a gift that she received from Nick in the amount of $5,000. And that she wasn't honest about a revolving account. They thought the tax lien should go on the revolving account. It's a whole mess. This is a mortgage application. I think those of us who have ever owned a home, there are a lot of things that you're doing to just try to get to the finish line in this process. And she was told by her mortgage broker testifies to this, that he told her that she could not withdraw the $5,000 from the shared account she has with her child. She put her daughter on her checking account. You cannot pay for the $5,000 earnest money with a minor's account. So they said, do you have a joint account? She said, yes. He said, well, can you get the money from your husband? She says, sure, I'll ask him for it. But she was not sure if he had it based on the tax lien situation. She asked him for the money. Not sure that he has it because Black women are always going to fill in the gap.
Right.
She deposits the money. And he can give it back to her, but to a different account. They decided that this is some type of money laundering enterprise.
Nefarious,
wow.
Right?
Wow.
And that, it's this craziness. So anyway, the jury acquitted her on the Kissimmee property, but convicted on the Longboat Key property. Both of them are Florida condos. At issue is this $5,000 gift from her husband, and the prosecution is claiming that it was this whole money laundering operation. The thing that stresses me out about this is just from this piece alone, Marilyn is facing 30 years in prison.
So is this in addition to, so she could get 35 years?
Yeah, she could.
This is a mother. This is a mother
But
of
even
2 girls.
beyond that, this is,
Wow.
I know we said we're not cussing that much on this podcast, but this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And to tap into the bullshit, Scott Bolden, who was her attorney on the first case, went on the court steps and said, this is bullshit. Got threatened to be held in criminal contempt.
Because you can't speak ill about the court.
Wow.
But he was on the court steps
But Donald
outside.
Trump is walking free right now.
He's clear. He's clear. He's clear. He's making a point.
I got this same
That's
threat.
crazy.
In my
That's why I
case.
want to hear from you, because you face this. But
You cannot insult the court. The
So
court being
here's
the
the
judge
thing. And here's the
and
thing.
everything under his purview.
This is, I said I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to tell y'all. The former delegate who she worked on the legislation with,
Eric, whatever his name is.
the vacatur statute,
yeah.
is the prosecutor in the case.
Wow. Now, okay, let me ask this.
Is the prosecutor in this case.
And did he decide to do this, or was he instructed to do this?
Well, you can always say no.
So
you can quit. You can. But here's my other thing. Eric Barron is a black man, a U.S. attorney who was appointed by this administration. Wow. This judge who was threatening to hold Scott in criminal contempt of the court, which then put him in conflict to not be able to represent Marilyn in the second trial. She then had to get a public defender in the second trial. The judge who threatened to hold him in criminal contempt of the court, black woman appointed by Joe Biden as well.
So again, this is a
huge nightmare.
No. So
and these are federal charges.
Federal charges, facing 35 years in prison for what? Like,
can I?
So you just name check the identity, the race of these individuals who are culprits in this all. I made the point earlier about power, and I said it was in many ways, without regard to race,
and
power stands on it.
I
know you're not done, but I want to pull back just for a second, because first of all, to learn of the particulars is to just grow more frustrated by the whole thing, because I think the greatest offense occurred when you pull back to there ever being charges in the first place.
Exactly
I would like
right.
to know how many times the U.S. attorney in this district has brought similar like charges to any other common person in the city, because this gets at the heart of selective prosecution.
Right.
Selective prosecution, which is a defined term in the Department of Justice. The United States Department of Justice understands what it means to select because of who the person is, to then decide to go after them for reasons or causes that you have never pursued anyone else.
Yeah. It's
never
targeted,
pursued anyone else. It is targeted.
And it's to make an example out of her. And it's not just for anybody who becomes prosecutor in Baltimore. It is for black prosecutors across the country.
But let's just state plainly what the example is.
Yeah.
The example is this woman had the unmitigated gall to turn a system that has survived generations, that has survived ancestors, that has survived, and it is a critical part of upholding the status quo as they know it.
Yeah.
If police officers in Baltimore now know that they can be held accountable for their illegal activity while under the cover of the badge, y'all, are you kidding me? I cannot overstate on this podcast how critical her disruption has been. I would say that Marilyn Mosby was at the tip of the spear of prosecutors around this country deciding that it was okay to then pursue prosecutions of law enforcement officers. So her example is not just about being in Baltimore. Her example
is wide net of influence.
It is larger than any of us will ever be able to put words to.
I have a question for you, if I may. This woman, both of you really, we cannot she held the line for us as a community, and she faced and squared off against the system. You too have squared off against the federal government and lived to tell about it, which is not a very common thing. You are an attorney. We cannot let this happen. She held the line for us. We need to hold the line for her. What can we do now to make sure that she does not see 1 day of jail time? I'm not talking about a reduced sentence. This mother of two who survived a hard upbringing in Boston, Massachusetts, went to Tuskegee, I believe is where she and Nick met, in Alabama.
She's the daughter and the great-granddaughter of law enforcement officers herself.
She comes from law enforcement. We cannot let this happen to her. What would have been helpful to you when you were going through this? And Angela, as an attorney, like what can the people listening do?
So where we are, I mean, I'll just say what would have been helpful, obviously, would have been the resources to bring a fight that matched the enemy, your opposition, right? I needed the strength, both legally but also financially, to wage that war. There are people sitting incarcerated today, far too many, who didn't necessarily commit the crimes that they were accused of, but they did not have the resources, the wherewithal, or the stomach to potentially risk being away from their children, their family, a day longer than was necessary, right? And so they say, I'll cop to this because 99.9% of cases that the Department of Justice brings, either they settle or they win in court. I'm part of what is known as the 3%ers.
Wow. Praise
the
God for that.
3% who fight back and then beat their ass.
Yeah.
Wow.
And beat their ass because they're liars. And I'm not casting all aspersions, but you do understand how closely hand in glove law enforcement and
They try to
prosecutors
destroy.
officers are.
It's
Prosecutors don't
enmeshed.
bring cases without the support and the wherewithal of law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't work these cases up to then go present it to the attorney
Watch your water.
what do
without
we
the
do?
support of the attorney. So what? I don't know if she's got a fund set up,
she? Angela
a
T?
legal defense fund, but it sounds to me like there are many grounds for appeal. But
Yeah,
I
but
also
she's
think
appealing.
that there are political grounds under which this department should not have been and is not within its rights. If we were to pay attention to the letter of the law under this targeted prosecution, to have been bought charges in the first place, they wouldn't sneeze at $5,000 at the Department of
It began
Justice.
under Donald Trump. And the first thing that I would say is, Merrick Garland, what are you going to do to separate yourself from a different Department of Justice
Don't hold the breath.
administration? But I'm saying it's time for somebody to ask him that. I think that Merrick Garland needs to resign. He is really culpable in a lot of ways. And this whole targeting of Black elected officials that has been, it doesn't matter who's in office, really.
Yeah.
They will just target Black elected officials. And I think that is where we get into the nuance of partisanship, and when we don't see ourselves reflected in something that we voted for. We stood up for you. We protected you. You were going to be a Supreme Court justice for
Right.
us. I went on air defending your ass when I did not believe in your ability to really protect our interests on the Supreme Court. And then this is how you repay us?
But he's not going to resign. So if
I want him to resign.
we can, but I'm saying realistically and tangibly,
I don't think that
what
that's,
can we do
I
to
don't
help
think that's-
Maryland right now?
Sure, but I'm just a part of it, because what I'm getting at is he is listening to this man named Leo Wise. Why does this matter? Leo Wise was the chief counsel for the Office of Congressional Ethics when it was stood up. Nancy Pelosi came in saying, we're going to be tough on ethics. So they stood up this whole office that targeted CBC members. Congresswoman Waters was subject to an ethics investigation by the same man. What does Leo Wise have to do with Maryland? He went to DOJ. He was the one that worked up Maryland's case. This is now under Donald Trump, and they still kept this going.
Well, now it's under Biden.
But what I'm saying, it started under Donald Trump, though.
The
It started-
investigation into me and the plot to
Was that under Donald
trap
Trump as
me was
well?
under Barack Obama.
Well,
so,
wow.
So let me just say
But I'm
this, which
saying-
is that these institutions exist without touching
systemic.
their heads.
But
Right,
my
it's
point
systemic.
is that until someone is held to account for how that system is operating, it is going to continue. They need to clean house. It shouldn't just be Merrick Garland. It should be that whole department. That there needs to be an Office of Inspector General report on what is happening in there and the targeting of elected officials. How dare you prosecute someone for $5,000 goddamn dollars when Donald Trump has 91 indictments? Are you kidding me? And y'all are twiddling your thumbs trying to figure out what to do with him, how to go at him. And this
Right.
is what you're the government. Wait a minute.
No.
The resources that are being spent, the taxpayer dollars that are being spent on this trial, this is millions of dollars for $5,000 goddamn dollars.
But the thing is, if I'm Maryland, I'm like, what can we do immediately?
I know that, but what I'm saying is you have to clean.
Do we ask the administration for a pardon?
Yes,
like,
of course.
Yeah.
And we've been saying, we started that last week. Of course we go to the pardon. But this, I think Maryland would not just want us to protect just Maryland.
Yeah,
this
that's true.
office has to be dealt with. They
Yeah.
have to be held to account. She should now
If I'm a
really
listener,
receive.
what is the ask?
So first of all, and I appreciate you drawing us back to this, because if you were listening and you're wondering, why should I care about this thing? Why does this matter?
This
Why did we have
matters.
to listen to that level of detail? If you are sincere, folks, and your desire, your need for justice and the way it is administered in this country, for Maryland, for me, for names that we cannot call this moment, but we can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that somebody else is being raked over the coals 10 times over by this same institution that has been built, stood up, and is largely operating to silence what are political enemies.
Yeah.
And Maryland matters.
They're not
Because if
political
they
enemies,
can do-
though.
they are political
support. It's
enemies.
advocates for Black justice.
Well, Angela, but then ask ourselves, who doesn't want that?
Right.
Who is
Yeah, I hear
standing
what
in
you're
the way
saying. I
of
hear
that
you.
thing happening?
Yeah.
So before her, there weren't prosecutors who were ever viewed as being separate from law enforcement. Prosecutors were not seen as separate from that. Grand juries, can you believe that grand juries in this country, which we inherited from Great Britain when they were colonizing the world, every place they colonized got rid of the grand jury process except two places, the United States being one of them. And then we decided to ensconce it in our Constitution, in the Sixth Amendment, so on and so forth. But the grand jury was supposedly set up so that citizens could be sure that governments did not use its power to go after their own individual enemies. It was supposed to be a check on them. Yeah. What are they today? They are a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
When we hear that
grand juries used to be filled with black women.
They mean nothing today other than a rubber stamp on prosecutors. All I'm saying here is this sister matters. If you forget her name, if you forget what her job title was, let me tell you, she is transformative to how justice can be perceived to be administered in a fair way that goes after every corrupter, that goes after nobody is above the law, not law enforcement and not a president. She exhibited that. She's now paying the cost of it. I know that there are people who are sitting in judgment about where they could have done this and they could have done that. She didn't do anything different than people who are going in every day getting mortgages. They figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
And with their own money and resources.
With her own money,
right. That's the part that's confusing.
That is the part.
And they didn't go out there trying to break some law and find themselves at the crosshairs of the federal government coming after them viciously.
Well, Marilyn now is in a position where she doesn't even have a car. Her grandmother is in hospice. She has cancer. She's trying to take care of her grandmother. She still has her two girls. I think the divorce is almost final, if it's not final. This is such a tragic, catastrophic event. I cannot imagine how she's just making it. She is barely holding on. This is something that we need to call to attention. I'm just going to remind the listening audience, in case y'all don't know, when Kamala Harris was being called top cop and being raked over the coals for prosecuting black men, Marilyn is someone who they called on to defend her as a surrogate. And this administration owes her a pardon, not because she campaigned for them, but because this is bullshit. And it is so wrong.
It's wrong and it's illegal under DOJ guidelines.
How about that?
It is illegal. The practice is illegal. You have selectively targeted a person, not because of what they've done. You sought after. You selected records going back as far as 2014. You were after trying to catch her up on something. Y'all, there were foundations, there were wealthy people, there were celebrities, there were others who lifted Marilyn up and held her as a shero and a heroine in our community because of what she did. Well, she is no less that person today.
That's right.
And she's deserving of our support and our outcry to this administration to make right what they have done wrong.
Yeah. And so to this point, May 23rd is when she's supposed to be sentenced. They can absolutely tee up a pardon, and that's what we should ask our listening audience and our viewers to do. Tell this administration they should be pardoning Marilyn Mosby. Marilyn Mosby is the exact type of prosecutor this country needs. Everyone who's a progressive prosecutor right now is being faced with this type of animus, and I think that it's time for DOJ to be turned upside down.
And last, before we go to a break and then come back with our asks of you, I want you to know that what this is attempting to send is a signal that if you even think about prosecutor, running for prosecutor, becoming prosecutor in the mold of a Marilyn Mosby, you better think again. So the shot over the bow is not to Marilyn. They don't care. I mean, clearly they want her out of the way. But the shot really is to the rest of us to say, don't you dare even dream about it, young man, young woman, little boy. Stay in your proper place. Do the proper thing.
Well, yeah.
And that's it. So just know that the opposite of doing nothing and allow this to happen is to allow them to win at this fight for achieving real justice in this country. We're never going to get there if this is what they can do to seekers of justice.
But Donald Trump got 91 indictments.
Right.
And we talking about $5,000.
Well, I honestly just want to say thank you, Angela, because I think it's important to hear this in layperson's terms about what exactly happened. So thanks for doing the background and the research and making it plain. And thank you, Andrew, for sharing your testimony about what you went through, because I want to make it real and tangible for people. Imagine if this were you. You would want people to stand in your corner. And, you know, for anybody who supports Marilyn, if you're listening, we will not forget you. You did not abandon us. You stood for us, and we will always stand with you and for you.
Thank you, sis.
And now we'll pay some bills and be right back. Well, Angela, I appreciate you deep diving us on that really important conversation. And of course, we invite you all to follow it up. But unfortunately, listeners, we went over our time. So Politics Everywhere, we're kicking that to a mini pod, and you won't want to miss it. We'll be talking actor Terrence Howard, who is ordered to pay $1 million in back taxes after saying, I won't tell you right now. You'll have to listen up for the rest of that response. So we got some calls to action. I know I feel like we've already given the one that I'm a co-sign, so y'all two can give yours. But my call to action is going to be really toward this Marilyn Mosby piece of folks tweeting about it, pushing it out, doing whatever you got to do to spread the word. This woman deserves a pardon, not for herself only, but for all of us, and the way in which she stood up for real justice, real reform. Angela, what you got?
I definitely agree with that. I want to shout out again our dear sister Tiff on Across Generations. I hope that people will go subscribe now so that you get the alert for her first episode.
Yeah.
Tiff, we're so proud of you.
Thank you. Well, she stole my call to action, but I'll say it.
You can repeat it.
Yes, I'll repeat it. On March 12th, we drop the pilot episode and another episode. So you'll be able to check that out on iHeart Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you prefer to watch, you can check us out on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel. Across Generations. See what I did there? Tiffany Cross, Across Generations. So please download, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, everywhere you can find us. Drop a comment, all the things that we ask you to do for Native Land. And while you're at it, drop a comment on Native Land and rate us and make sure that you stay here. And just to reiterate, I'm not going anywhere. You can always hear me talk politics here on Across Generations. We will not talk politics at all.
Welcome home, Tiff.
Yeah, what a relief. Before we end the show, I want to remind everyone to leave us a review and subscribe to Native Land Pod. We're available on all platforms and YouTube. New episodes drop every Thursday. You can also follow us on social media. We are Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, and I'm Andrew Gillum. Welcome home, everybody. And there are just 242 days until Election Day.
That's crazy.
Home, y'all.
Welcome home.
Go get registered. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.